Gallipoli campaign was significant to World War I in different ways, but how was it significant? To understand the significance of the campaign, we have to learn what the campaign was and its effects on the war. The Gallipoli campaign was a military campaign that had taken place during World War I on the Gallipoli Peninsula. It lasted from the 17th of February 1915 to the 9th of January 1916. The purpose of this entire campaign was to allow the Allies to move their ships through the Dardanelles and capture Constantinople and knock out the Ottoman Turkey from the war, which would then help the Allies to victory. However, as history tells us, this is not the result, and this battle ended up costing the Allies 187,959 deceased and wounded men, and the Turkish 161,828 men. From statistics, we can say this had a massive effect on both sides in fatalities, but how exactly did it change the course of World War I? It would have changed the course of war a little bit due to a large number of casualties. This meant both sides would have to rebuild their armies, making both sides a little bit weaker. If the Allies had won, it would have had more an effect due to the reason they could have weakened the Central Power significantly, giving them the upper hand in the war. To understand the war even greater and its significance, we have to discuss the living and fighting condition for the soldiers. Trenches were a massive part of the campaign, as it provided an area for soldiers to rest and have cover during gunfire. Even though it's convenient, it was said that it took massive effect on the soldiers mentally and physically. It is difficult to sleep and keep clean due to the gunfire and uncomfortable circumstances, which still not allow them to leave their trenches. A quote from a soldier that had experienced life in the trenches during the Gallipoli campaign truly gives a picture of how horrible life in the trenches really was. Quote, where the connecting trench joined in, an unfortunate fellow was stretched out decapitated by a shell, just as he had been guillotined. Beside him, another was frightfully mutilated. I saw, as if hallucinating, a pile of corpses they had started to bury right in the trench. There was no one here but the dead, I exclaimed. This was quoted on December 19th, 1915. Even the way the trenches were managed was hard on the soldiers. They went straight and were in a zigzag pattern and went on for kilometers, and they were quite deep, 1.6 meters approximately. Also, because they didn't have any place to go to the bathrooms, they would have to dig holes and use them. This meant the soldiers would have issues with all different types of diseases caused by dysentery conditions. This image here shows how uncomfortable and difficult times were for the soldiers while fighting in the trenches. As I said earlier, fatalities and injuries were a high number for both sides during this war, but for those who survived, how were they treated medically? During most campaigns and battles, both sides would typically have a tent that would be used to treat soldiers, and this was the same for the Gallipoli campaign. After being treated as much as they can in the tents, they would be transferred to a hospital outside the battlefront. However, collecting bodies was quite difficult. As there was a high number of fatalities, that meant there were a lot of dead bodies just lying there. It'd be difficult to collect that because they would have to enter the battlefront and risk being shot and injured. This meant soldiers would have to bury their comrades and wait until the war is done to collect them and rebury them. This information just truly shows how difficult living conditions were during World War I and the Gallipoli campaign. From this, we can have a solid understanding of the significance of the Gallipoli campaign. The significance is the amount of lives lost from both sides of the war, the use of trenches, and soldiers truly learning how devastating they were, and it was one of Turkey's greatest victories in any war.